But she's a tape.
I'm going to call the meeting to order. It's 5 o'clock, July the 28th, 2022. And thank you and welcome everyone to the IndyGo Board of Directors meeting. And first of all, we're going to do a call to order. Roll call.
Thank you. Please indicate your attendance. Ms. Pace.
Present.
Mr. Wilson.
Present.
Mr. Hahn.
Present.
Ms. Fagan.
Present.
Please note that I believe Mr. Abdullah is about to enter the room.
Well, we'll wait a second.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joy.
I didn't either.
I know, so.
Okay.
There he is.
Hey, guys.
You said the wrong call, right? Perfect timing.
Yes. So one more time, so we have him on the record.
CSX was be still in. 1025 also again,
Director Abdullah, would you please indicate your presence?
Present.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joel. Next is awards and accommodations. And do we have any awards or accommodations this evening? And for that, we'll have our president and CEO, Inez Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and directors. Today we have a few recognitions that are in your packet. You'll see the June 2022 Safe Drivers. The following driver I would like to point out for 20 years of safe driving, Dexter Davis. Congratulations to him. Our June Operations Employee of the Month is Fernelis Soriano. Y'all are really hurting me this night. Okay, y'all see how I spell it. Thank you. Okay, thank you all for your help. I was good on the first two names, okay? He is our coach operator fixed route for this month. I would also like to announce, happily and sadly, that Hardy Shaw will be departing from Indigo. This is her last board meeting tonight. We want to thank her. Her last day with us is August 5th. She has done a tremendous work for Indigo over our last years with working on overhauling our budget, working on major projects such as the Julian Parsons Center, the Red Line and Purple Line BRT projects, taking the role of being responsible for the D365 migration, and just being successful in obtaining a numerous number of grants for this organization to help move us forward. We wish her all the success, and I'm trying not to cry, but congratulations, Hardy, and you will be missed.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, that ends all of my announcements. Thank you.
I hate to tell her this, but we took a vote and the board rejects her.
Thank you. We all
You're an indentured servant now.
Absolutely.
Mr. Chairman, if I might, I think it would be appropriate for the board to take a vote and thank Mrs. Shaw and wish her well, to get that on the record
I think
formally.
that's a
So I make a
wonderful
motion that we congratulate Hardy Shaw and wish her all the best in her
Thank
new
you so
endeavor.
much. Thank you. I can't express my words to describe what I'm feeling through, and I have been grateful to serve for Indigo, for the board, as well as the leadership, and work with some awesome, talented folks. So thank you so much for all the love and support throughout these years. Appreciate it from the bottom of my heart. It's not
Yes.
trying not to cry.
There's been a motion and a second. Is there a vote? All those in favor?
Aye.
Bonus in the mail.
Yes, for sure.
And thank you very, very much.
Yes.
We will be remembered. All right, so next we have our committee reports. And the first one is Finance Committee, Mr. Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Finance Committee met on July 21st, 2022 at 8:30 a.m. In attendance was myself, Rick Wilson, Chairman of the Finance Committee, as well as committee member Mary Ann Fagan. We reviewed and recommended board approval for the following items on tonight's agenda: consent agenda items A1 and A2, and regular agenda item A4. An item from the committee meeting that I'd like to highlight is action item A2, approval of East Campus B Building Construction Contract Change Order for 3D Professional Contracting Incorporated. Chief Development Officer Jennifer Pierce presented this action item to the Finance Committee. IPTC advertised IFB 21-09-420 in October 2021 for construction of the East Campus B Building renovations. Through that procurement, 3D Professional Contracting Incorporated was selected to serve as the general contractor for that work. The project includes renovation of existing facilities to accommodate IPTC staff, offices, a new training center, and a public meeting space for board meetings. This project's original scope of work included a partial update of existing doors and hardware. However, after further safety and security review, it was determined that the facility will require updates to all existing doors and hardware. This change in scope will ensure IPTC's new facility functions as a safe work environment for employees and visitors, and allows the facility to be better managed and secured through updated hardware, card readers, and specialized doors. This change order covers labor and materials needed to update the doors. Procurement of the actual card reader equipment will be covered under a separate procurement. Mr. Chairman, that concludes my report.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wilson. The report's accepted. Next, we have, in absence of our committee chair, Darius Gardner, who's would do the service committee report. We're going to have our Chief Operating Officer, Cheryl Purefoy.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and everyone. My name is Cheryl Purefoy. I'm the Deputy Chief Operating Officer, and I'm here in Director Gardner's stance to present the Service Committee Chairman's report. The Service Committee met on July 21st at 10 a.m. In attendance were Director Gardner, the Chairperson of the Service Committee, as well as the committee members Lise Pace and Hydra Abdullah. The committee reviewed and recommended board approval for the following items for tonight's agenda. Consent agenda items A1, A3, and A8. The items from the committee member that Director Gardner would like to highlight is the action item A8 to approve the Swiftly GPS technology for non-revenue vehicles. IPTC currently has 46 non-revenue vehicles which do not have GPS tracking capability. Contracting with Swiftly, the current provider for the revenue fleet, will allow IPTC to track all of our vehicles and add this needed functionality to all non-revenue vehicles, while maintaining consistency across all IPTC vehicle tracking. This contract is scalable to include any increase or decrease to the non-revenue vehicle fleet. Vehicle-specifically traffic tracking will provide greater visibility for assets and staff conducting IPTC business utilizing these vehicles. The GPS service will help increase operational efficiency, allowing resources to be quickly redeployed as needed in the field. Mr. Chairman, that concludes the Service Committee report.
Thank you very much. Your report is accepted. Great job, Cheryl. Next, due to my absence, and I think Darius as well, Mary Ann Fagan, our esteemed board member, covered the Governance and Audit Committee. So would you like to make that?
I would love to. The Governors and Audit Committee met on July 21, 2022 at 1 p.m. In attendance was Mary Ann Fagan, sitting in place of Chairman Greg Hahn, as well as committee member Rick Wilson. We reviewed and recommended board approval for the following items on tonight's agenda. Consent agenda item A5, A6, and A7. An item from the committee meeting I would like to highlight is action item A5. Approval of Microsoft D365 Upgrade Independent Project Oversight Status Review. Director of Governance and Audit, Brian Atkinson, presented this action item to the Governance and Audit Committee. The D365 project kickoff was in May 2021. The system go-live occurred as scheduled in May 2022. The project duration was 12 months, excluding certain close-out activities and post-go-live support. The independent project oversight will assess whether the D365 technology project is on track to be completed within the estimated schedule and costs to provide the required functionality for the business owner. The IPO review procedures focused on critical scope areas relating to the D365 project's progress and project management practices, including assessment of the project controls in place, comparison to project management best practices, monitoring of project schedule, budget, scope, and overall delivery, evaluation of project risk management, including the identification, monitoring, and resolution of project risks, identification of opportunities to enhance project manager performance. The D365 project did not experience any significant delays from the original scheduled dates. There are certain tasks, including project closeout, that remain open. Mr. Chairman, that concludes my report.
Thank you, Mary Ann. Well done. Next, this brings us to item number 6, information items, which are items I-1 and I-2.
That's not correct.
No, we got the
Oh,
regular
oh,
A4.
oh, I skipped over, sorry. Thank you. That takes us to item 4. Consent agenda, which are items A1, A2, A3, A5, A6, A7, and A8. Are there any items on the agenda that a board member would like to add or remove to the consent agenda?
No.
No.
And can we have a motion, a second, to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? Not hearing, that's consent agenda is approved. All right. Next is the regular agenda. And that is item 5, which is item A4, consideration and approval of resolution 2022-04 to acquire updated appraisals and purchase real property located at 9625 East 33rd Street, Indianapolis, Indiana, directly or by eminent domain, and this will be presented by our Chief Legal Officer, Jill Russell.
Thank you. Good evening, board members. Jill Russell, Chief Legal Officer. And in a manner consistent with Indigo standards and practices and Indiana statutes, I'm here to ask for the approval and signage of Resolution 2022-04 that will authorize the President and CEO, Inez Evans, to acquire 2 appraisals for the property located at 9625 East Washington, East 33rd Street, and then to enter into negotiations for the purchase of that property not to exceed the average of those 2 appraisals. And the alternative, should that fail, we would like to authorize President Evans to initiate eminent domain as authorized under Indiana Statute 36-9-4-32 for the acquisition of this property. You may remember that I came to you in November of last year, because at that time we were under the impression that a sale was possible with parties, and that did not pan out. Because it's been a passage of 6 months, we need to acquire new appraisals pursuant to the statute, so we can approach them with an offer at this point. We have spoken with the owners of this property, and I'm cautiously optimistic, but let's be practical, we might end up in eminent domain. This is the property immediately adjacent to the east campus. It's the former Celadon property itself. It consists of a maintenance facility for semis that could, or for buses, as well as another 11 acres for building and constructing a training track and testing site for CDL drivers. We have an agreement with the BMV that we are now allowed to administer CDL testing. We have exhausted our alternatives. We have been looking at property almost since the time we acquired 9503 East 33rd, looking for a place to build a garage. Because of the Marion County Transit Plan, our increase in services requires an increase in our fleet size. We're all aware that right now our current facility is inadequate to even house our current fleet, and we have seen our close calls with certain safety situations. We're putting not only our fleet at risk, but we're also endangering some of our staff if we cannot get a facility that's adequate in size to accommodate our needs. So that's why we are asking you to go ahead and authorize us to proceed with this particular procurement. Are there any questions?
Well, Mr. Chairman, let me just add that Jill presented this to the Finance Committee, and we had a fairly robust discussion, and I completely support exercising this. You know, I'm not a big fan of the government taking people's property away, but I think if we can work something out, that'd be optimal, but we really are at a point where our fleet size is so large that it's, the facilities we currently maintain are just not adequate, and I think we need to move forward with this, so.
If I may add at this time, this property is currently being leased to a tenant who is vacating in 8 months. So they will be without a tenant at that time. And this is a Canadian company that owns this property.
So just getting ready to ask, if it was a personal property owned by an individual or a corporation?
It's a Canadian corporation.
What was the reason they drag on the negotiation? What was the reason?
Or the what?
What was the reason that they drag on or whatever they refused to?
Part of the problem was we found out that the parties we were utilizing to contact them failed to even make initial contact back in November. So we tracked down their local representative who finally put us in touch with their Canadian chief legal officer and initiated some discussion with him.
So that was the reason?
The reason why they never heard our offer in November.
I'm just like Mr. Wilson, I'm not a big fan of eminent domain, but if he agreed, then I have no.
Well, we will endeavor to make this as amicable as possible.
Okay. Any other questions? Lisa? No. Okay. Can I ask for a motion and a second for approval, consideration and approval of resolution 2022-04 to acquire updated appraisals and purchase real property located at 9625 East 33rd Street, Indianapolis, Indiana, directly or by eminent domain?
So I'll move.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those
Aye.
opposed? Duly passed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joe. Okay. This takes us to information items. And those are items I-1 and I-2. First I-1 is a receipt of the finance report for June 2022 presented by our Chief Financial Officer, Barbara.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mark Brown, CFO for Indigo. This is the June 2022 financial summary. Under revenue, our federal assistance revenue came in over budget by $409,000 for the month, and so far $1.8 million for the year. Most of the increase was due to an increase for our ADA support under our 5307 grant. The passenger service revenue is over budget by $89,895. I'll say that again. Passenger service revenue came in June over budget by $89,895 for the month. That's a 16.9% increase, or over the budget. But we're still under budget for the year, $317,000. If we continue the trend that we have seen this year, I hope that our passenger revenue service will be at or above budget for the year. And our property tax revenue collected in June was $5,025,000, and year-to-date we have collected $20.6 million. Total revenue for the agency is over budget by $2.4 million for the month and $7.6 million for year-to-date. Under expenditures, personnel services, our fringe benefits are under budget by $317,000 month of June, and under budget for the year $1.7 million. Overtime continues to be over budget, as we saw our budget $284,908 over for the month of June. For the year, $940,000. Salary expenditures were under budget by $1.1 million and $4.2 million for the year. All of personnel services category is under budget by $1.1 million for the month of June and $5 million year-to-date. Other services and charges. Claims are under budget by $195,000 for the month and $413,000 year-to-date. In June, the purchase transportation category is under budget by $438,000 for the month and $992,000 for the year. Under services expense, it's under budget by $760,000 for the month. Also under budget for the year, $3.9 million. Overall, other services and charges category is under budget by $1.4 million for the month of June and $5.7 million year to date. Materials and supplies, the fuel and lubricant category is under budget by $180,000 for the month of June, $986,000 year to date. For the month, total materials and supplies is under budget by $267,000 for the month. Year to date, under budget, $1.7 million. Overall expenditures came under budget in June by $2.8 million and $12.5 million year to date. Moving on to our non-budget requests, we had two report. We had a request to install handrails at red light stations for ADA compliance, and we also approved design fees for the Ivy Tech charging up at the Lawrence on the end of the purple line. And finally, moving to our capital. Not a lot to report. The largest expenditures that are yet to hit the report are East Campus facilities of $16 million. That will go toward the building of the garage that Jill just talked about. And then we still have some BYD buses at $18.8 million. Mr. Chairman, that concludes my report. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
So the over budget, the first one, the first page. Okay, that 89,895 over budget. Is that a total revenue income, or is that over budget 16%?
So that number represents when we estimated revenue last year for the year for passenger service. This represents the actual collected over the estimate we made last year based on what we thought we would collect due to COVID in 2022.
So 89 is the total revenue for June collected, or is it?
Oh, I'm sorry. No, it is, the total collected would be on that, go back to that spreadsheet. If you look at passenger, it's probably going to be hard to read. So the passenger service revenue collected, we budgeted $531,000 for the month, came in at $620,000. That's just the variance. We're just reporting on the variance. But this page in your packet gives you all the actuals versus the total budgets.
Okay, good. Consider everybody paid, right, for the fares.
Well, I can't say everybody. I will say that we are getting a lot more folks riding the bus and paying, yes.
Thank you.
Bart, Mr. Chairman.
No, go ahead.
Bart, just one quick question. The design fee for the Ivy Tech charging work, why wasn't that in the budget for the purple line? Why is this an unfunded request?
I'm going to look at our CEO for help on this one.
That is, let me turn the mic on. Thank you, Director Wilson. If I recall correctly, we changed the parameters at the Ivy Tech facility. So we were able to get additional footprint from Ivy Tech, and so that was not in the original design package. So there are additional design fees on top of that because we added a secondary lane, and so we're adding on those design costs and we're bearing those because it wasn't a part of the original package.
Okay, great, thank you. Thanks, Bart.
Thank you.
One more question, for that handrail at Red Line Station for ADA, was not part of the early design, is it overrun, the cost overrun?
It was a change to the original design. The angle or pitch of the railing, even though it was compliant, the ADA community said we could have done better, and that's why we're making the adjustments.
So we fix it because due to
Exactly.
passengers, whatever, right,
Yeah.
it's a request. Okay. I was thinking, should be the early design to comply
Yeah,
with ADA.
they're compliant, but, you know, with anything you get input about pitch ratios of concrete, the height and pitch of railing, and so we're making the necessary adjustments.
So that 38,000 for one station or for multiple stations?
That is for multiple stations, sir.
Okay, got it.
Any other questions?
No.
Thank you, Bart.
Thank you.
And then last is I-2, 2023 budget proposal presentation, and that will be by Bart and Deputy CFO Artie Shaw.
Thank you. Bart Brown again. This is your 2023 proposed budget. On the front page, we have a couple key dates that we want to bring your attention to.
Oh, is that this book?
There is a count, there are a lot of what we're talking about tonight will be in that book, and on the slides, we either have page numbers for you to look at. And I just want to start out by saying you're not voting on anything. This is just a presentation. It'll take a month, and we'll come back in August meeting, and that's when we'll ask you to either approve or to change or deny the budget. So tonight's just the introduction. On Thursday, 8/11, we have a required public hearing on the budget. The public can come in and comment on the budget. There won't be any question and answers. However, it's customary if the board has any questions of staff, we'll take them that night as well. And then the budget adoption, hopefully, will be 8/24 at your August meeting. Between now and then, our staff is available for one-on-one with any of the board members that would like us to spend time with you going over the budget and any questions you might have. There are a couple other important dates. By September 1st, we have to have a budget submitted to the City County Council for their review. We will go to the Municipal Corporations Committee of the Council on September 15th, and we being myself and our CEO to present to that committee. They will then, on October 17th, the full council will take up our budget and either pass again or make modifications. Next slide, please, Joe. There's a clicker up there, I'm sorry.
On that.
Oh, okay.
You guys turn it on inside.
Oh, there it is, okay. All right, let's see if I can figure this out here. Great, so this is my budget team, again led by Artie Shaw, Justin Burko, as our budget manager, Cassie Burmeister, our grants manager, Alex Lang, projects and data administrator, budget analyst, and Alex is leaving too, so I'm leaving. It's either myself or Justin. We have some issues we got to talk about because everybody sees this. In addition, I want to thank our CEO, Inez Evans, for the guidance that she provides during the budget, and all the heads of our divisions and departments for their input. So the total budget for what we're proposing is $263 million. That consists of $130 million of operating, $122.6 million capital, and debt service of $10.7. The biggest items that make up budget, first, it's a 5.2% increase over this current year's budget. We're seeing a $700,000 in personnel cost increase on wages and benefits. That actually could have been a lot higher, but our staff and division heads and departments really worked hard to either absorb new positions, convert positions. We worked hard on the benefits, and also we have an attrition rate. So even though we're going to budget 903 employees, part of that is 500 operators. So this budget will be able to fund 500 operators, but there is an attrition factor that we always take into account. So that lowers that budget number. There is a 2% negotiated wage increase for all union ATU members, and we also put the same in for non-union. The biggest driver of the increases, though, will be our new facilities. So our insurance costs for all the facilities, our IT, security, O&M, everything that's going in when we open and have a full year operations is the biggest driver of that 5.2% increase. And please, if you have any questions while we're going through this, feel free to stop me and we'll do our best to answer. This is, again, just going over the numbers, that I said 5.2, it represents a $6.4 million increase over fiscal year 2022. We also want to give you, and again, this is in the book, we want to give you an outlook of what we think our budget will look like. Next year, we're going to see another significant increase, about 5%. We typically have between 3 and 4%, but because we're still ramping up with the Marion County Transit Plan, even though this does not take full build out into account, it does take into account we're going to bring on the purple line and begin to look at the blue line hiring. So this budget does support the purple and blue line opening in 2027.
So by having a new, what called BRT purple line, we increase the employees too, the operators?
Well, at the same time, we hope you're going to approve the COA, which will have increases in service on other routes at the same time for the connections. So it anticipates that.
Okay.
And I think at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Hardy Shaw. Of course, we have to have a balanced budget by law. 2023 is balanced, and Hardy's going to show you exactly how we're going to balance the next couple years here.
Thank you, Bart. Hardy Shah, Deputy CFO here for Indigo. So this is an extremely important exercise that we undertake every year, just because it allows us to plan for a better future. And some revenue sources are really difficult to forecast as they are highly dependent on the macroeconomic factors. And if you look at the second column of this table, that is showing 2023 proposed budget for the revenue. So it mainly breaks down into three main categories, which is our local funding sources, our state funding sources, as well as the federal funding sources. So our total, as Bart mentioned, the balanced budget, so our revenues are going to be equal to our expenditures. So it is also a 5% anticipated increase in revenue for FY 2023, and we will go in detail as to what revenue streams are expected to have some bumps and some revenue sources are expected to have declines. So under the local revenue sources, there are two main revenue categories that we actually rely upon. One is the property and excise taxes, which is about $39.3 million. It is 5% increase over 2022's budget, just because the property tax growth, the levy AVGQ, that's what they call it, assessed valuation growth quotient. So that is expected to increase by 5%, and it is roughly about $200,000 increase from FY 2022 in the property tax only. But it also takes into account the $14.8 million special property tax levy. Just to provide a disclaimer, this is not an additional property tax levy that we are imposing on top of 2022. This is what we asked every year to be able to match our expenditures. So that has been approved by the City County Council as well as BLGF.
So that's what we are receiving, right?
We are receiving regularly since 2016. Transit income tax revenue. Post-referendum, we had been receiving transit income tax revenue to support our operations, transit operations, and we spend it on our operating capital as well as debt service. So we are expecting about 3% increase over 2022. In 2022, we budgeted about 2% increase because we are still coming from the post-pandemic situations, and even though we estimated a decline in FY 2022, we ended up seeing a growth. So it was just natural for us to anticipate a moderate growth in our transit income tax revenue. Fares, passenger service revenue. Bart mentioned in his finance report that we are seeing some increases in passenger service revenue, and this is highly encouraging. But while we are budgeting for next year, it is extremely important for us to look at the 18-month actuals where we had been standing post-pandemic. And since last 2 years, we had been budgeting somewhat higher than what we had been getting actually. So in 2023, we decided to go a little conservative rather than being too optimistic on our budgets. So we are looking at budgeting $5.1 million $5.2 million, which is about 2021's actual realization for the local passenger service revenue. And our other operating revenue stream has been steady. It's about $1 million, which includes our advertising revenue, our speedway contract that we have, and then some other miscellaneous revenue sources. Any questions so far?
So, are you gonna adjust the revenue from the fares if we get the actual income for 2022?
For which revenue source, excuse me?
For the fares?
First, we actually received $5.1 million in FY 2021. So we are actually budgeting at that actual levels rather than being too optimistic, like, just looking at 2 months.
So that's based on 2021?
Based on 2021 actuals, yes.
Okay.
Moving over to state and federal, we have been seeing a steady stream of public mass transit funds, which is administered by INDOT. There is no change in the estimates. As for federal, we have been receiving some stimulus funds over the past couple of years since post-pandemic. But with the bipartisan infrastructure law under the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, there is an increase about 30% in the federal formula funding. Federal formula funding is extremely important to any transit agency to sustain in future, just because the competitive opportunities may not be guaranteed to any transit agency. So we were highly encouraged with this 30% increase in the federal, which allows us to run our transit operations smoothly and invest into our capital infrastructure. So this budget includes about 30% increase in ADA, preventative maintenance for our buses, and 1% in safety and security. As well as $14.6 million estimates that we will draw down from our federal stimulus funds, which were in part from CARES Act, CARISA Act, as well as the American Rescue Plan Act. So we have been, as Bart reports every month on his report, that we have been parking money that we are drawing off of our expenditures in an investment fund to be able to fund our future years of the budget when we see some offsetting impact on our revenues. So basically, that's what we are strategizing to help us with the balanced budget. Next slide is just a graphical representation pie chart showing which revenue sources are bringing what percentage of revenue. So mainly 64% is under local. We are looking at 9% in state, and we are looking at about 22% in the federal funding. And next is our capital budget. We actually, again, this is a 5-year capital improvement plan, but by statute, we are required to present annual capital budget. So even though we are looking at the plan and on a very holistic basis, we need to make sure that we are presenting accurate information for the upcoming year based on the changes that we have been seeing based on all the economic factors that have been affecting, as well as some legislative challenges and some other factors. So capital budget efforts were undertaken by Finance and Capital Planning Group together. There were lots of discussions as to why and when of all these projects when they were submitted by the project managers. We have had lengthy discussions with them as to when do you absolutely need it, what can you postpone, as well as what can we do to contain the cost of the projects. So this is a very responsible and conservative budget based on the best estimates that we have come up with so far. And as you can see in the next chart, major investments are into BRT as well as on-street infrastructure projects, facilities, which includes our East Campus garage construction, and investment in our fleet to make sure that we have a adequate Purple Line fleet, as well as the fleet replacement cycle that we are anticipating, which is 1/12 annually. So that is in short. Again, I think I just covered the major projects. So these are the projects that are comprising the majority of 2023's $122 million capital budget. And how are these projects going to be funded? We are looking at securing, or we already have identified the funding sources, about $41.3 million in federal grants, which include our small stats grants for Purple Line, as well as some other 5307, 5309, and 5339 grants. We have also looked into pitching in $30.6 million in Indigo local capital and $50.7 million in bond proceeds, which we have issued so far in 3 bond issuances. So we are at this point in time, whatever 2023's capital projects are presented to you are fully funded with these funding sources. And I will turn it over to Bart.
So Hardy just mentioned the bond issues, and this is the annual debt service that we will owe on these bonds. The 2028, wow, that's a lot of feedback. The 2018, that will be retired in somewhere around, I think, 2027, 2028. So we only have a few more years of that, and that will go away. 21D, the 2.3, that's for the hybrid, the Allison buses that you see going around town. And the 2022 are for the facilities and the Purple Line buses. This will be the first year we pay on that debt. If you haven't been following the news, the Fed increased interest rates today. All of these 3 bond issues came in below 3%. Right now, from what I see, everything is tracking just over 4%. So when we go out to the blue line, let's hope that the economy improves and we'll get some rates below 4. We budgeted our projections at 4%. So right now, I think we can get there, but it's that's at 100 million. So that percentage goes up, that amount we can borrow for goes down, or the project money. So, and I think that concludes our presentation. We'd like to take any questions you might have or comments. Again, we will sit down with you anytime you want for the next month to go over any questions. The board, again, can take this budget and you can ask for any adjustments you want. On the 11th, the public will come in. Again, we can have a discussion there publicly if you wish. And then the 24th is when we ask you to approve a budget to send on to the council. Mr. Chairman, that concludes our presentation.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mark, Hardy, your whole team. Great job. A lot of information to digest, so I'm sure we'll all do that. Is there any final questions from the board on the budget?
Hardy, when's your last day? 5th?
5th, next Friday.
I actually got an announcement on that. So we are having a reception for Hardy on the 5th, and here in this room from 1 to 3. So
Next Friday?
next Friday. And also, Justin Burkhope has agreed to step up. Going to try and fill her shoes. But,
He'll do great.
he will do great.
So what's the
He's-
menu?
What's the,
And that's a surprise to me as well.
The rest will decide whether I want to come or not.
They all know I am such a foodie, so.
So Hardy, if I can't get with you before the 5th, would it be Justin that I would want to sit down with?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I might have a few questions too, but this is my, there goes my few hours at night.
There goes your weekend.
Yeah.
We get homework.
Good
Yes,
night reading.
Best nighttime
With
reading.
a highlighter, you're good to go.
You guys took a year, you require me what, how many weeks to read? That's not fair.
He's got 4 weeks from tonight.
Let me just say,
usually,
Hardy,
this
this
is
is
the
the staff's
condensed
favorite
version,
time of year,
right?
because I usually come back with this thing with little tab
Yeah.
notes and
Oh, you did.
underlines and.
Yeah,
So if you're
I
using
warned
it-
Justin that Mr. Wilson might come back with that.
So if you're using yellow, I'm using red.
Okay.
Yeah, plan well.
We'll make sure we coordinate our colors, maybe. Okay?
all right.
All right.
Thank you, board
Well,
members.
thank you very, very much. I just want to say thanks again to Hardy for your excellent public service to the city of Indianapolis and specifically to the Indianapolis Public Transportation Corporation. And we wish you the very best
Thank you so much.
going forward. And you've been really, really excellent to work with over the years that we've all been around. How long have you been there? I don't know.
7 years.
7, okay. And we'll continue to move forward. Thank you for the staff and all of your hard work. I know that we're still battling a lot of big issues, and we'll continue to move forward on all of those. And if there is anything else, I will adjourn this meeting for the Indianapolis Public Transportation Corporation. So moved?
Moved.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.